Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Tylearn, and today we're going to be doing a different type of video, and as you guys can see by the title and thumbnail, we're going to be talking about Star Wars, specifically a Star Wars versus battle. Mace Windu versus Yoda. And here, I'm not actually alone, for I have the greatest Mace Windu stan on YouTube, Key Issues Garrick.
That's me.
All right, man. And today we're just gonna basically answer the question, who's stronger between Mace Windu and Yoda, since there is a lot of debate and contention with this. And with that being said, yeah, let's get right into it. The first thing I want to be going over is the statements of both of them being the strongest Jedi, as they both have statements of this. So the first thing that really comes to mind, specifically for Yoda, who we're going to be starting with, is Yoda has been stated by Obi-Wan himself to be the most powerful Jedi. There's also the statements of Count Dooku being stronger than any other Jedi, and then Yoda scaling to that Dooku by reflecting his lightning. There's also Yoda being stated to be the greatest duelist, and this is actually confirmed, so there's consistency with this. And yeah, those are really the statements that kind of put Yoda at that level.
Right. And Mace Windu has a lot of similar statements from StarWars.com. There's multiple statements saying he's one of the most powerful Jedi ever. Characters in verse, such as Jedi Knights, Risa Mano in the Mace Windu comic book series claims that Mace is one of the top 5 Jedi of all time. He's considered to be the champion of the Jedi Order in multiple guidebooks, absolutely everything you need to know about Star Wars, the ultimate guide, etc., etc. So there are a ton of statements of Mace Windu being near this like top tier power level and not necessarily a character that's like significantly below Yoda. There's actually a statement that Mace Windu's powers are on par with Yoda's, so just blatantly the two characters would be relative to each other, if not exactly equal in their base form.
The difference between these statements for Yoda and Mace is that Yoda's is just kind of less consistent, and there are other interpretations you could use. For example, Obi-Wan making this statement would only really apply to base Mace Windu, as we don't really see him use his full power until when he fights the Emperor using Vaapad.
Yeah, and there's even a scene in Attack of the Clones where Anakin suggests that Mace is the most powerful when he's talking about Obi-Wan's wisdom and overall power. He mentions that Obi-Wan is as wise as Master Yoda, but he's as powerful as Mace Windu, suggesting that Mace Windu would indeed be more powerful than Yoda, or at least held in the same high regard as Yoda is.
These statements for Yoda being the greatest duelist would only really apply to skill rather than AP, since, like, again, he's like the greatest duelist, so he has enough skill, or has enough skill in order to like defeat other Jedis in duels, not necessarily for it being like an AP thing. And this would be contradicted by like literal feats in the series, which we will get into.
Yeah, and skill's an interesting point to bring up because most of the characters near the top of the verse are all very skilled in lightsaber combat. I'd say they're all probably relative to each other. Characters like Yoda, Mace Windu, who we're talking about, and others like Anakin and Count Dooku, as well as Darth Sidious. I mean, you have the scene in Attack of the Clones where Yoda is dueling Count Dooku, and Count Dooku makes a statement like, we're equal, like, in force power, when that's blatantly contradicted by statements that say Yoda's outright 2 times more powerful than Count Dooku is. So really the two characters were just matching each other in lightsaber dueling ability, and Yoda was just holding back his power as to not, I guess, one-shot his former Padawan. I'm not really sure, but there are outright statements that Yoda's just twice as powerful as Dooku.
That's really all for the statements of them both being the strongest. It just seems like for Yoda, it's mostly in terms of skill, while for Mace, it would just be kind of an overall, like, strength, speed, like, in general. So I think Mace would have the edge in terms of these statements.
And even if you want to, sorry to interject, even if you want to consider the stats that are on the back of the Topps trading cards for the Star Wars universe, and even if you want to consider the stats that are on the back of the top Star Wars trading cards, Mace Windu overall has better stats than Yoda, just from a baseline, taking a look at it, as far as strength, speed, and dueling ability is the only thing they're actually equal in.
Yeah, and surely those stats may seem kind of scuffed, but for the next point we're going to get into, it actually seems pretty consistent.
Yeah, I mean, the tops cards are, I wouldn't say 100% reliable, but they are indicative of where the creators of the universe are kind of scaling the characters. Because, I mean, that would just be direct power scaling by the people that are crafting the verse, right? So while they might be a little bit iffy and can be debunked with feats, I think in this case, they support what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, and the next point we're going to be talking about is how Mace Windu objectively did way better against Sidious than Yoda. And we can first go over with Yoda versus Palpatine. There are a lot of misconceptions with this fight. Like, people like to say how Yoda and the Emperor were scrapping, but Yoda just left due to plot convenience, and Yoda would have won. Those really just they just don't make any sense at all, since there's multiple pieces of evidence supplying and supporting that Sidious was stronger than Yoda even when he's using all the power of the light side, and Yoda left to save his own life, and if he kept on fighting, he would have died. Nothing really contradicts this unless you want to resort to the plot argument, which again gets shut down by Sidious just being massively above Yoda. And keep in mind, this wasn't even Sidious at his full power, as we do know that he got hit with his own Force Lightning, which does weaken life. So, hypothetically, he wouldn't even be at full power against Yoda.
Yeah, and in his fight with Mace, obviously he's not fried and super screwed up. And of course, like you mentioned, he did get hit with his own Force Lightning in this duel, which would have weakened his life, as you stated. And in his fight with Mace Windu, that being Sidious, he wasn't holding back in this fight. I know that's a huge point of contention for Star Wars fans, as you mentioned earlier, the Yoda leaving plot convenience thing, and Sidious luring Anakin in plot convenience thing. But there are multiple statements from a variety of sources, guidebooks, StarWars.com directly, as well as the Topps trading cards, which explicitly state that if Anakin didn't show up, Sidious would have been killed. Meaning, even if Sidious was waiting for Anakin, it doesn't matter because he would have lost regardless. And the reason for this, even though we have a statement of Mace Windu and Yoda being exactly equal or on par with each other in terms of power, is because Mace Windu has something that Yoda simply doesn't, and that's Vaapad. Now, if you're not familiar with Vaapad in Star Wars canon, which is what we're talking about, not Legends, Vaapad in canon allows light side users to draw on dark side energy to amplify their power. And there's multiple statements that Sith become stronger after abandoning the light side and embracing the dark side, such as Dooku and Anakin. So in this case, we have Mace Windu, a character who is equal to Yoda in power, right, which we mentioned earlier, using the dark side to overcome or eclipse Yoda's overall level of power. So the only real contention here would be, is Yoda so much more skilled at dueling than Mace to beat him? Could he overcome this ridiculous gap in power, or would it, not really matter? Personally, I don't think it matters that much because, like I mentioned earlier, all the top tiers are going to be relative to each other in dueling. Even Yoda and Dooku, a character that's half as powerful as Yoda, is relative to him in dueling ability.
Yeah, and essentially the scaling or the chain scaling would just go Mace Windu with Vaapad over full power Palpatine, which would scale above a lightning harmed Palpatine, which would be above Yoda.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's pretty concrete. You can say that if you take away Vaapad from Mace Windu, maybe Yoda would stand better of a chance. And I think in that instance, Yoda would probably win. We know they're equal in power. We know for a fact that Yoda is the better lightsaber duelist. So sure, in that instance, Yoda would win. But in this instance, we have Vaapad to consider, right? And even without Vaapad, you can still make arguments through the whole Sith lightning thing that Yoda would still lose to Mace. I think personally Yoda would beat Mace without Vaapad, but with Vaapad, I think it's a stomp, and I don't think it's anywhere near close.
Yeah, I would have to say the same thing as well, since Mace Windu scaling is just a lot more consistent than Yoda's, and overall, at least for canon, because I know in Legends Mace Windu kind of stinks, but for canon, I think Mace Windu is marginally above Yoda with his full power.
Yeah, and I mean, there are more concrete feats that you can like point to as like evidence for Yoda being stronger than Mace, such as Yoda being able to lift up an entire mountain or stop a mountain-sized creature from moving, and other similar feats. I mean, Yoda has access to things such as Force Stasis, which is the ability Kylo Ren uses when he stops the blaster bolt at the beginning of The Force Awakens. So Yoda has these different things, you know, on his side. But when you consider the statement that Tylearn had mentioned earlier about the two characters using the full power of the light side and the full power of the dark side against each other, that being Yoda versus Sidious, that full power completely eclipses any sort of calculable feat that we have for Yoda, such as moving the mountain. So that would be inconsequential in this sort of debate. And when we're talking about direct power versus another character's direct power, Yoda using the ability of Force Stasis wouldn't really help him because, again, Mace would just be more powerful and would be able to break out of it. So you have so much evidence in the favor of Mace Windu in this instance because they have direct comparable duels against Sidious that you really can't dispute other than using your own like weird headcanon.
Yeah, so really anything like with the large town Yoda mountain feat, it doesn't really matter how strong it is because Mace Windu just directly upscales. So no matter what Yoda has, it's just a stomp. So with that being said, if you guys do want to see other Star Wars videos, you know, not just on this channel, but on another channel, Key Issues, you guys can go check that out as he has his own video specifically on how strong Mace Windu is. If you guys just want to solely watch a video about Mace Windu. And with that being said, you guys can go check out my other Star Wars videos down below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell if you're new. Like the video, share it with your friends. And peace. Go subscribe to Garrick.
Let's go. Thanks for having me, Ty.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Peace out, guys.